The city reeled from the politician's death, a high-profile case that dominated headlines and fueled public fear. Captain Miller, under immense pressure, leaned heavily on Dr. Julian Vance, whose calm demeanor and meticulous forensic analysis provided a much-needed anchor in the storm. Vance, ever professional, presented a compelling narrative, a politically motivated assassination expertly executed by an unknown, highly skilled operative. He pointed to subtle inconsistencies in security footage, a faint, almost imperceptible residue on a discarded item near the scene, all meticulously crafted to misdirect the investigation down a rabbit hole of international intrigue. Detective Sarah Jenkins, however, felt a growing unease. The politician's death, like Thomas Albright's, bore the chilling hallmark of being too clean, too perfectly orchestrated. The narrative Vance presented was flawless, yet it felt manufactured. She found herself scrutinizing Vance with new, unsettling intensity. His explanations, while scientifically sound, always seemed to neatly tie up loose ends, leaving no room for ambiguity, no lingering questions. It was his very perfection that now screamed imperfection to her. Ignoring the official channels and the subtle warnings from Captain Miller to focus on the current case, Jenkins began her parallel investigation. She spent her nights in the precinct's archives, a dusty, forgotten realm of cold cases and unsolved mysteries. She pulled every file Vance had ever touched, particularly those classified as suicides, accidents, or cases with inconclusive forensic findings. Her shadow dossier, once a collection of vague suspicions, began to take on a terrifying shape. She noticed the patterns first, not patterns of motive or victimology, but patterns of absence. In cases spanning over a decade, crucial pieces of evidence were consistently missing or deemed irrelevant. A lack of defensive wounds in a supposed struggle, an improbable trajectory in a fall, a toxicology report that, while conclusive, seemed to ignore a more subtle, underlying cause of death. And always, Dr. Julian Vance's signature on the forensic reports. His conclusions presented with an air of unassailable authority. One evening, as she was poring over the autopsy report of a young woman found drowned in her bathtub 5 years prior, Jenkins noticed a peculiar detail. The report, signed by Vance, stated no signs of struggle. Yet, a faded photograph attached to the file showed a faint, almost imperceptible bruise on the victim's inner thigh, easily missed unless one was looking for it. Vance had attributed it to post-mortem lividity, a plausible explanation, but Jenkins's gut screamed otherwise. It was too precise, too localized for mere lividity. She cross-referenced the case with the Albright file. The same meticulousness, the same subtle misdirection. Vance wasn't just a brilliant forensic scientist. He was a master illusionist, using his knowledge to create a smokescreen of scientific certainty. The realization sent a cold shiver down her spine. The man they all trusted, the man who held the keys to unlocking the truth, was the very one locking it away. Her interactions with Vance became a subtle dance of veiled accusations and charming deflections. She would present a minor anomaly from an old case, phrased as a hypothetical question, watching his eyes for any flicker of recognition, any hint of discomfort. Vance, ever the predator, would parry her questions with ease, his smile unwavering, his explanations smooth and logical. He would praise her curiosity, her sharp mind, all while subtly reminding her of her junior status, of the importance of trusting established expertise. "Detective Jenkins," he said one afternoon, leaning against her desk, a casual pose that belied the intensity in his eyes. "You seem to have developed a fascination with the minutiae of past cases. While commendable, one must be careful not to get lost in the weeds. Sometimes a simple explanation is the correct one. Not every shadow hides a monster." "And sometimes, Dr. Vance," Jenkins replied, meeting his gaze, "the monster hides in plain sight, cloaked in the most unexpected form. A beat of silence stretched between them, thick with unspoken tension. Vance's smile tightened almost imperceptibly, a micro-expression that only Jenkins, now hyper-aware, could detect. He knew she was on to him. Vance, meanwhile, was not idle. He had noticed Jenkins's subtle inquiries, her lingering glances, the way her questions had become increasingly pointed. He saw the nascent threat she posed, a small but persistent thorn in his perfectly constructed reality. He admired her intellect, her tenacity, even. It was a shame, he thought, that such potential had to be extinguished. But the game required sacrifices, and Jenkins, with her inconvenient observations, was becoming a liability. He began to plan his next move. Not just another murder, but a strategic maneuver to neutralize Jenkins. He needed to discredit her, to make her seem erratic, obsessed, perhaps even unstable. He started planting subtle seeds of doubt among her colleagues, casual remarks about her overactive imagination or her tendency to see conspiracies where none exist. He knew the power of suggestion, the insidious way doubt could erode trust. His next victim was a young, aspiring journalist, known for her investigative zeal and her willingness to challenge authority. Vance chose her not for any personal slight, but for the message her death would send. He would make it appear as a suicide, a tragic end to a promising career, but with just enough ambiguity to fuel public speculation about a deeper conspiracy. And he would ensure that Jenkins, with her burgeoning reputation for seeing patterns, would be the one to find the anomalies, the one to be drawn into the web of his making. The journalist's body was found in her apartment, a meticulously staged scene of despair. A suicide note, seemingly authentic, lay beside her. The apartment was locked from the inside, no signs of forced entry. Captain Miller, exasperated by the recent high-profile cases, was quick to declare it a suicide, eager to close the book on another tragedy. But Jenkins, arriving at the scene, felt the familiar prickle of unease. It was too perfect. The note was too eloquent, the despair too theatrical. And then she saw it. A single, almost invisible fingerprint on the underside of a teacup, a print that didn't belong to the victim. She knew it was a trap. Vance was playing with her, taunting her, daring her to expose him. The fingerprint was too obvious, too convenient. It was a bait, designed to draw her in, to make her look foolish, or worse, to implicate her, but she couldn't ignore it. Her instincts, honed by weeks of poring over his past crimes, told her this was the opening she needed. This was Vance's first real mistake, a moment of arrogance, a slip in his otherwise flawless facade. Jenkins carefully documented the fingerprint, taking her own photographs, ensuring that no one else saw it. She knew she couldn't trust anyone in the department. Not yet. She had to play Vance's game, but on her own terms. She had to be as meticulous, as cunning as he was. The stakes were higher now. It wasn't just about solving crime. It was about exposing a monster hiding in plain sight, a monster who wore the badge of justice. She decided to use Vance's own methods against him. She would plant a seed of doubt, a tiny anomaly that only he would recognize, a message that would tell him she was onto him, but without revealing her hand entirely. She would use the very language of forensics, the subtle art of misdirection, to communicate her intent. The game had escalated. It was no longer a quiet investigation. It was a silent war, fought with intellect and deception, where the next move could mean life or death, not just for victims, but for the detective herself. The unsettling pattern was becoming terrifyingly clear, and Sarah Jenkins was ready to break it, even if it meant risking everything. The tension between Jenkins and Vance became a palpable, unspoken current in the precinct. It was a silent war, fought with glances, subtle inflections, and carefully chosen words. Vance, ever the master manipulator, continued his campaign to subtly undermine Jenkins's credibility. He would make offhand comments in meetings about her enthusiasm, sometimes leading to overthinking, or her youthful idealism clouding her judgment. He knew that in a hierarchical structure like the police department, a whispered doubt could be more damaging than a direct accusation. Jenkins, however, was not easily deterred. She had learned to navigate the subtle currents of office politics, and Vance's tactics only solidified her suspicions. She continued her clandestine review of his past cases, now focusing on the patterns of his victims. She noticed a disturbing trend. Many of the accidental deaths or suicides involved individuals who, in some subtle way, had crossed Vance's path or presented a minor inconvenience to him. A disgruntled former lab assistant, a journalist investigating a story that touched on the department's internal affairs, a neighbor who complained about his late-night activities. These were not random victims. They were carefully selected targets, eliminated with surgical precision. Her shadowed dossier grew, filled with meticulously cross-referenced notes, timelines, and subtle discrepancies. She started using a secure, encrypted cloud drive, paranoid that Vance might somehow access her physical files. She even began to record her conversations with him, a small, discreet device hidden in her pocket, just in case. She knew she was walking a tightrope, but the truth, she felt, was worth the risk. Vance, for his part, was growing increasingly frustrated. Jenkins was proving to be more resilient than he had anticipated. His subtle attempts to discredit her were having limited success, and her quiet persistence was beginning to chip away at his carefully constructed facade of invincibility. He needed a more direct approach, a way to eliminate her without drawing suspicion to himself. He needed to make her disappear, to make it look like she had simply gone too far, crossed the wrong person, or succumbed to the pressures of the job. He began to observe Jenkins with the same meticulous detail he applied to his victims, her routines, her habits, her vulnerabilities. He noted her late nights at the precinct, her solitary walks home, her occasional visits to a small, out-of-the-way coffee shop. He saw the loneliness in her eyes, the quiet determination that fueled her. He almost admired her in a detached, clinical way. Almost. His plan began to take shape. He would use the very serial killer narrative he had created to his advantage. He would stage an attack on Jenkins, making it appear as if she had become the latest victim of the elusive killer she was so desperately trying to catch. It would be a tragic irony, a poetic end to her misguided crusade. And he, Dr. Julian Vance, would be the one to discover her, to mourn her loss, to lead the investigation into her tragic demise. He selected a location with care, an abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of the city, a place known for its desolate atmosphere and its history of illicit activities. It was the perfect backdrop for a brutal, unsolved murder. He began to prepare the scene, planting false clues, creating a narrative that would point away from him, towards a phantom killer. Meanwhile, Jenkins received a breakthrough. The independent lab results for the fingerprint she had found on the teacup in the journalist's apartment came back. It was a match, not to the journalist, not to any known suspect, but to a latent print found on a piece of evidence from a cold case, a case that Vance had personally overseen and closed as an accidental death. The pieces clicked into place with a terrifying finality. The dewdrop, the missing evidence, the perfect reports, the subtle patterns, it all pointed to one man, Dr. Julian Vance. Her heart pounded in her chest, a frantic drumbeat against her ribs. She had him. She finally had him. But the elation was quickly replaced by a cold dread. She was alone. She couldn't trust anyone in the department. Vance was too powerful, too respected. She had to be careful, incredibly careful. She knew he was watching her, waiting for her to make a move. She had to play this perfectly. She decided to confront him, but not directly. She would leave a message, a subtle hint that she knew, a challenge that only he would understand. She would use the language of forensics, the very tools he used to conceal his crimes, to expose him. She left a meticulously arranged set of documents on his desk, a seemingly innocuous collection of old case files, but with one particular report subtly highlighted, a report that contained a very cold case linked to the fingerprint. It was a silent declaration of war, a gauntlet thrown down. Vance found the documents later that evening. His eyes scanned the highlighted report, and a slow, predatory smile spread across his face. Jenkins. She was smarter than he gave her credit for. She had found his one mistake, his single moment of youthful carelessness. The game had just gotten interesting. He knew what she was doing. She was challenging him, daring him to make another move, and he was more than ready to oblige. He sent her an anonymous email, a cryptic message that hinted at a new discovery. A breakthrough in the serial killer case, inviting her to meet him at the abandoned warehouse, alone, late that night. He knew she would come. Her ambition, her sense of justice, her burning desire to prove him wrong would compel her. He would be waiting. The final act of his masterpiece was about to begin, and Sarah Jenkins, the tenacious detective, was about to become its tragic muse. The unsettling pattern was about to culminate in a terrifying confrontation, a deadly dance between predator and prey, where only one would emerge victorious. The city, still unaware of the true monster in its midst, slept on, while in the shadows a silent war raged, its outcome poised to shatter the very foundations of justice and truth. Jenkins arrived at the abandoned warehouse, the air thick with the scent of decay and damp concrete. Her heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic drumbeat against the silence. She moved cautiously, her hand on her holstered weapon, every shadow a potential threat. The email had been precise, almost taunting. Come alone. The truth awaits. She knew it was a trap, but she also knew this was her only chance. Vance had made his move, and now it was her turn to play. Suddenly, a voice echoed from the darkness, calm and resonant. Detective Jenkins. Punctual as always. I knew you wouldn't disappoint. Julian Vance emerged from the shadows, a faint smile playing on his lips. You've been a persistent little fly, haven't you? Buzzing around my carefully constructed web. I almost admire your tenacity. It's over, Vance, Jenkins said, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. I know about the cold cases, the patterns, the fingerprint. It all points to you. Vance chuckled, a dry, humorless sound. Evidence, detective? You have a collection of circumstantial anomalies and a single, conveniently placed fingerprint. Hardly enough to bring down a man of my standing. Besides, who would believe you? A rookie detective with an overactive imagination challenging the esteemed Dr. Vance. The truth has a way of coming out, Julian, Jenkins countered. You're insane, Jenkins whispered, a cold dread creeping up her spine. Am I? Or am I simply a man who understands the inherent flaws in your system, the desire for easy answers, the reliance on superficial evidence? I merely exploit those weaknesses. Detective, I am the unseen hand that guides your justice, the architect of your convenient truths. He took a step closer, his eyes glinting in the dim light. But you, Sarah, you saw through the illusion. You dared to look beyond the surface. And for that, you must be commended and eliminated. He lunged, not with brute force, but with the calculated precision of a predator. Jenkins reacted instantly, drawing her weapon, but Vance was faster, his movements fluid and unexpected. He disarmed her with a swift, practiced motion, the gun clattering to the concrete floor. He pinned her against a rusty pillar, his grip like iron. Such a waste, he murmured, his face inches from hers. Such potential. But you chose the wrong path, detective. You chose to challenge the unseen hand. And now, you'll become another one of its forgotten masterpieces. Just as his fingers tightened around her throat, a piercing siren wailed in the distance, growing louder with each passing second. Vance's eyes widened in surprise, a flicker of genuine shock crossing his face. "Impossible," he hissed. "How?" Jenkins, gasping for air, managed a weak smile. "You underestimated me, Julian. I didn't come alone. I planted a tracker. On your car. On your person. Everywhere." The siren was deafening now, flashing blue and red lights illuminating the warehouse entrance. Captain Miller, followed by a squad of armed officers, burst through the doors. Vance's gaze darted between Jenkins and the approaching officers. The perfect facade shattered, replaced by a raw, primal fury. He released Jenkins, making a desperate dash for a back exit. But the warehouse was surrounded, cornered. With nowhere to run, Vance let out a guttural scream of frustration, a sound that was more animal than human. He was captured, his reign of terror brought to an abrupt, unceremonious end. Miller found Jenkins, barely conscious, her body already beginning to stiffen. He cradled her head, his heart heavy with guilt. "Sarah, you did good, kid. You did good." Vance was apprehended without a struggle. As he was led away in handcuffs, his eyes met Jenkins's. There was no anger, no fear, only a chilling, intellectual triumph. He had been caught, yes, but his art, his message, had been delivered. He had proven his point. The system, for all its supposed infallibility, had been outsmarted by one of its own, and in his twisted mind, that was the ultimate victory. Jenkins recovered, physically, but the experience left an indelible mark. She had stared into the abyss of pure, calculating evil, and it had stared back. She had seen the unseen hand, and it had almost claimed her. Vance's trial was a sensation, his meticulous confessions detailing every crime, every manipulation, every subtle misdirection. He spoke not with remorse, but with a chilling pride, explaining his philosophy, his art, his contempt for the very justice system he had so expertly subverted. Captain Miller, humbled and shaken, retired shortly after. The department underwent a massive overhaul, its procedures scrutinized, its blind spots exposed. Jenkins, now a seasoned detective, became a legend in her own right, her intuition and meticulousness honed by her harrowing encounter. She understood the darkness in a way few others could, a chilling empathy born of proximity to pure evil. She continued her work, but with a new understanding. The perfect crime was not an impossibility, but a constant threat, a shadow lurking in the most unexpected places. And the unseen hand, though imprisoned, would forever serve as a reminder that the most dangerous monsters are often those who hide in plain sight, cloaked in respectability, wielding the very tools meant to protect us. The game was over, but the echoes of Vance's chilling philosophy, and the knowledge of how easily the system could be manipulated, would forever haunt the halls of justice, a silent testament to the unseen hand that had once moved among them. Jenkins knew that vigilance was not just a duty, but a constant, personal battle against the insidious darkness that could reside within anyone, even those sworn to uphold the law. The hunt for justice was eternal, and she, Sarah Jenkins, was now its most vigilant guardian. The confrontation in the warehouse was a blur of adrenaline and desperation for Jenkins. Vance, with his chilling calm, had almost succeeded, but the cavalry, thanks to her foresight, had arrived. The sight of Captain Miller and the tactical unit, bursting through the doors, was a moment of pure, unadulterated relief. Vance's capture was swift, almost anticlimactic, given the elaborate nature of his crimes. He offered no resistance, no struggle, only that unsettling, knowing smile that seemed to suggest he had won, even in defeat. As Vance was led away, his eyes met Jenkins's one last time. There was no malice, no anger, just a profound, almost intellectual acknowledgement. It was the look of an artist whose masterpiece, though interrupted, had still made its indelible mark. Jenkins, bruised and shaken, watched him go, a cold certainty settling in her heart. This wasn't truly over. The physical threat was neutralized, but the psychological scars, the chilling philosophy Vance embodied, would linger. The aftermath was a maelstrom. The news of Dr. Julian Vance, the city's most respected forensic scientist, being the serial killer known as the Unseen Hand, ripped through the city like a wildfire. The public was outraged, betrayed. The police department was in disarray, its credibility shattered. Captain Miller, a man of integrity but also of deep-seated trust, was devastated. He had vouched for Vance, had defended him against Jenkins's early, seemingly outlandish suspicions. The weight of that misplaced trust was almost unbearable. Jenkins, on the other hand, was hailed as a hero. Her meticulousness, her unwavering intuition, her refusal to be swayed by Vance's charm or the department's skepticism had saved countless lives and exposed a monster. She was promoted, her reputation solidified, but the victory felt hollow. The encounter with Vance had changed her. She now saw the world through a different lens, a darker, more cynical one. She understood that evil wasn't always a snarling beast in the shadows. Sometimes it wore a lab coat and spoke with calm authority. Vance's trial was a spectacle. He pleaded not guilty, not on the ground of innocence, but on the grounds of artistic expression. His defense argued that his murders were not crimes but performance art, a philosophical statement on the fallibility of justice. He delivered chillingly articulate monologues from the stand, detailing his methods, his motivations, his contempt for the very system he had so expertly manipulated. He spoke of the beauty of precision, the elegance of the unseen hand, and the ultimate triumph of intellect over chaos. He was a showman, even in the face of life imprisonment, turning his own condemnation into a final, perverse exhibition. Jenkins testified, her voice clear and strong, recounting her meticulous investigation, the subtle patterns, the hidden clues, the chilling realization that the man she respected was the monster she hunted. Her testimony was instrumental in securing Vance's conviction. He was sentenced to multiple life terms, ensuring he would never again walk free. Captain Miller, unable to reconcile his trust in Vance with the horrific reality of his crimes, retired shortly after the trial. The department underwent a massive overhaul, its forensic procedures scrutinized, its internal biases exposed. Jenkins, now a detective lieutenant, spearheaded many of these reforms, ensuring that no other unseen hand could operate within their ranks. She became a mentor to younger detectives, instilling in them a healthy skepticism, a relentless pursuit of truth, and an understanding that appearances could be deceiving. But the echoes of Vance's philosophy lingered. Sometimes in the quiet of her office, poring over new case files, Jenkins would catch herself wondering, had Vance truly acted alone? Or had his twisted ideology, his art, inspired others? The city, though safer, was forever changed. The illusion of perfect justice had been shattered, replaced by a chilling awareness of the darkness that could hide in plain sight, cloaked in respectability, wielding the very tools meant to protect.
If you have a strange experience or a story you can't explain, leave it in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this story, make sure to like the video and subscribe to the channel. There are many more stories waiting to be told. Until the next video, stay safe.